Good morning. We are in pond number 2. We're deep into it and it's going very, very well. In this video, I'll talk a little bit about the ponds and I'll just share some recent insights that I've had on the last. We've been with these guys about a week and a half now, and it's been a cool learning lesson. So for greater context, or maybe pretext, when I originally was planning to do these ponds, and this has been in the plans for over a year, but when I was originally thinking about it, I was talking to my friend, and I wanted him to do it for a while. He has a big machine. It's an older machine, but it's a 20-ton machine. It's a proper road construction machine, and he has a dump truck. And we were looking at this whole project, talking about the 2 ponds, all the same basic stuff that we're talking about now. Except in the original plan for this pond, this one was going to be bigger because he was going to have his big machine come in and just clear a ton of stuff. But I'm really glad we didn't do that, and it's been kind of serendipitous. And I'll kind of share those insights with you. And so what we did, and so the original quote estimation on that project for that time was to build 2 ponds. Granted, this one would have been bigger. That one probably would have been the same size. Dump truck. We would need to have, in order to really do a big job on this pond, we'd have to cut access in for the truck, which creates other challenges and costs. And I'll share some of those things that I've learned regarding that. But that's the basic context. And so what we've had to do, his machine is in repair, and he fixes his own machines as he always has. And he's been waiting on parts. Long story, not really important. What is important is that what happened shortly or recently before we started this project is I just said, shit, I really want to get this done before winter. And but frankly, my budget wasn't really looking like I could include it. If it was going to be 20 grand, I was going, I don't know, 20 grand's a bit of a stretch. I could maybe spend 10 and then had that 10 to be for some other things that the house needs before winter. Regardless, what I said was, well, why don't you guys just come out and run my machines? I have 2 machines. And yes, running smaller machines can take longer, and I'll get to some of that too. And sometimes there's an incurred cost. Some people assume that if you run a smaller machine, it'll be cheaper, but you spend more time. But the greater picture of the whole thing really will determine how much more it will cost. And that's what I'm kind of going to get to in this video. So anyways, we said, let's do it. And then we just started going for it. And so now the first week we would Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and this week will be Monday through Friday. So by the end of this week, we'll be at 1.5 weeks. And I have to say that so far it's been half the price. So it will be around 10 grand to do exactly what I wanted. The only thing we might not have done is the complete septic before winter, but we'll get the tank buried and we'll get that well on its way. We won't need the septic to function over winter, I guess, so if my construction guys could take a shit in the house or something, but they can just go to the outhouse that we have here too. So it wasn't needed. And we're about 10 grand in so far. No. By the end of this week, we'll be about 10 grand in. And that's half the price of what we originally thought. The thing that's been really interesting and sort of an advantage to having the small machines is that it's allowed me to maintain more of my pristine vegetation that I have here with all my trees. Because originally, if we were going to have the big machine do this, we couldn't have a dump truck come down there. It was going to be through here in this draw, and that would have been a huge mess, and it would have changed the landscape that I already put time into doing. So by doing this with small machines, yes, the mini excavator has to do more baling because it has a smaller bucket, it has a shorter reach, and it can lift less material. And so it has to do more baling. So that means that often the mini excavator's coming in, it's digging stuff and then queuing that material up and then later moving it or having the skid steer move it. Right now, what's happening in this pond is the skid steer is moving the material to the dump truck, because to bring the dump truck down here, as I said, it's just we have to tear up the landscape more. I don't want to do that. So yes, it's a bit more hours on the skid steer, but it's less force on the landscape. So in a way, it's been better that way. And yeah, that's been the real lesson here, is that sometimes small machines, you talk to somebody like Dakota Cohen, who does broad acre permaculture, kilometer long swales, things like that. He'll tell you absolutely a big machine is better. And I would 100% agree with him. In flat climates, you have easy access everywhere. A truck can go anywhere. I've got challenging access on a lot of trees. So that's not my case. So access is super important and has to be taken into consideration. But I'd say that's been, the big lesson here is that, how great was it that I just decided to trust my intuition and just say, let's just do it, run my machines. I have the machines, I'm paying for them. Or I've paid for them, let's use them. If I don't use them, and I'm paying for work that could be done by them, I'm spreading my return on investment a bit thinner, if you know what I mean. I'm not getting as much dollars on those machines as I could from the value. And that's why I bought those machines, because I knew I'd be using them a lot in construction, and that's been absolutely the case. Both machines are incredible. It's allowed me to do so many things that I wouldn't normally be able to do. And I run in the construction season, both those machines the skid steer gets run every single day, year round. Except in the winter when I'm not getting snowed on. But the excavator has run at the very least, probably 3 days a week on average, 4 days a week on average. So I'm getting huge value out of it. It's far cheaper, because of my context, to buy or finance or lease that machine than to rent it when I need it, because I have so much construction to do, because the context of my land requires so much machine work. And that's one of the biggest challenges you'll find if you want to live in this kind of climate. So coming to this pond, we've talked a lot about the first pond in the last number of videos that I've put out. Let's just talk a little bit about this one. So this one is working out really cool. It's not as deep as the other one. The other one, I've got multiple spots that are 8.5 foot deep. That's my deepest point from what we've chosen as our surface level. And I've got a lot of 6.5 feet there too, and then lots of nice shallow zones. It's a great dynamic pond. Sure, I'd like to have a bunch of spots that were 10 feet deep or more, but we're on bedrock. So that's just how it is. Same thing here. We're on bedrock. And in fact, we're on the same bench that runs right up this way, and this is where this water trickles down towards this pond. What this pond is going to be is a reservoir. It's really just going to hold water. I might want to do fish in here if it's possible. I'm certainly open to that, and I'm going to have power running here anyways, because at the bare minimum I'm going to want to have some kind of bubbler system in this, so that the surface is always moving a bit, so that I don't just turn this into a mosquito pit, which can be brutal. And it was brutal, because this pond was still knee high up until July. So that's why we had such a buggy season this year. But so at the very least, I'm going to have to do that in here. And then I'll have a pump in here. So what we'll do is we'll go to the lowest point in this pond. And now that I've shot this, this is 5.5 feet deep, so it's not that deep. And that would be where the water level is, right where the soil is. This pond can go higher, and it could push into that stuff. And so that might end up being 6.5 feet deep. But right now, at that surface level, it's 5.5 feet deep. It's not a ton, but it is the deepest point of the pond regardless. What we're gonna do is put a well pond in, put a well pump in here. So I've got one. I used it in a previous well on the site that turned out to be funked. It was only 30 foot deep, so it's a pump that can pump about that depth, and that'll be fine for this. So we'll put it, we'll have it sit in here horizontally, and it'll probably, I'll come and do a bit of hand landscaping down here to make this ground a bit flat. We'll put either some rocks or even some egg cartons to hold that pump about a foot off the ground. And then I'll put some drain rock around this, and we'll probably actually put the pump in a sleeve of some kind, probably a short piece of some leftover culvert material we have, and then bury it with a little bit of rocks. And then it'll just stay, that way it'll stay put, and it'll have a bit of a biofilter around it so it doesn't get plugged up easily. I'm sure every few years I might have to come and just clean it out a bit. But that pump, so I'll run electricity here, which I already have at that shack. So to get electricity here isn't a big deal. And I've got so much ample electricity in the summer, and that's the only time I'm going to pump this anyways, or the spring and summer. I've got so much ample electricity then that this will be insignificant. And so this pond will fill up the big pond, because the big pond no longer is able to capture runoff because we had to berm the high side of it. And that high side is right in the middle of this riparian area. That's the natural draw. That's all deciduous trees and cedars. And that all comes through here. And this is actually the part where it naturally stopped anyways. It stopped and started to fill into this pond, and then it spills over right where my laser, where's my laser? You can see it moving right there. Right there is this, where this draw naturally continues. And so we're preserving all of that. That's what's really neat about this pond that's different about the other one. We don't have to do any berming. We're just taking out all this crazy silt material. This is it's the most, actually this here's a bit of sand, which is nice. But we have just this silt. It's actually really good for building because it packs like concrete. And it's so nice that it's not raining right now and we can get all this done, because once this stuff turns into mud, it's brutal. But anyways, that's what we've got. And so this spillway will naturally just follow into my culvert system that just basically 250, 300 feet through this group of trees down here takes you to the first switchback on our driveway when you're heading down. It's a really wide switchback, and it crosses twice over the driveway, which is stupid. But here's a lesson in this video for that. And I've actually seen a couple people in the chat, in the comments on YouTube, because I did a stream the other day about some of the costs you could consider when you're developing raw land. And one guy in there, correctly pointed out the first thing you got to do is put in your driveway, your access, or improve what's there. And when you're putting in a driveway, I could do a whole video on this, but one really important thing you need to know when you're putting in a driveway, especially on terrain like I have, is that you need to identify where the water draws are. So basically you can do that at any time of year, because you can go and observe when you walk through the forest, look for low points, look for water collection points where there's leaves and there's a deposit of soil. There's all kinds of signs you can look for. But you want to find where, when the snow melts on your property, and this is particularly important for boreal climates where we have so much snow melt. So you want to identify where the snow melts to and moves, where you have those temporary or seasonal streams. And on this property, there was two main draws, and I noticed them right away when I looked at this property, and it was my biggest selling feature regarding water, because the well I knew wouldn't probably be too good. And so I looked at those draws, and what you want to do when you find those draws is avoid them with the driveway if you can. Of course, at a point, if you have to add an extra 100 feet of driveway to just save yourself from doing a culvert, well, then it might not be worth it. But what the owners of this property failed to do, and anybody could have made this mistake, but is that they crossed the driveway. So there's the water draw going down, and then the driveway crosses it like this. Whereas they could have just made the driveway stay on the inside of the draw, keeping everything out, and it would have saved me having to dig into culverts. But regardless, it's a little lesson there. But that's what's happening here, is once this pond fills, it'll just start to spill over. It's called a spillway. And this is a natural spillway. Whereas the spillway we've put in the constructed pond is two culverts, two 8-inch culverts that sit right at the what we've chosen to be as our top of our pond, and they go down about 3 degrees. So as soon as the water hits that, it's going to drain through. And I'll show this in another video, because one of the machines is working on them right now. We had one, and then we said, let's put another one in. But the spillway for that is really cool. And spillways are very important in ponds, because if you have any type of berming on the pond and it spills over, if it spills over from a surge rain or whatever the reason might be, if it's flowing on your keyway dam, it's going to erode it, and then it's going to compromise the whole thing. And you see this if you watch flooding videos in the southeast or things like that. You see this all the time. Or people's culverts get overwhelmed and then it surges over. You need to avoid that. But in this pond, the cool thing about this is that can't happen. If this pond were to max flood, all it's going to do is push through the natural spillway that it already has. And one thing Daryl did here, which is really cool, which I'll share with you, is he's built a beaver dam right here. And it's just a bunch of logs and scrap brush material that we pulled out of here. And he's put it right in the top of the spillway, or in the lowest point of the spillway. And what the idea is to do what beavers do. And the way Canada's forest ecology has been managed by the government has been an absolute nightmare, starting with when they started to cull beavers. Insane, because beavers are critical to the boreal landscape. You can even, instead of blaming wildfires on climate change, you could actually blame it on partially beaver dams, because beaver dams, when they're broken up, now they expedite the flow of water, which I'm sure the government might probably say, well, the reason we did that is so that we can harvest more hydroelectricity. And maybe there's a case for that, and I don't want to get into that whole thing. But the point is, beavers provided an incredible ecological service for the boreal climates. And so what we're doing here is mimicking that. We've built this beaver dam, and what will happen is when this water starts to flood over and surge, this is going to slow it down, because now it's got to go around it, and it'll push water around the areas, spreading out the surface area, thus slowing a hydrostatic pressure, pushing more, because you're spreading the pressure out, right? Pressure is most applied at a point. Spreading pressure is how you release pressure. And so that's the idea there. Super, super cool. But yeah, so that's basically where we're at with this pond. It will be a reservoir primarily, and it'll be a catchment to move water up into the primary bigger pond, which will hold probably 4 times more water than this. But again, this pond, because it's the lowest point before the rest of this water on this elevation of my property moves down, it's the last place it goes. This will accumulate water for a long time, and I can't wait. I'm giddy about the snow melt this year, and so I'm really looking forward to a huge dump of snow. Last year we got 10 feet of snow, and that was we've spent 3 winters up here. That was our 3rd winter, and it was the most snow I'd seen up here in those 3 winters. And so my family skis and snowboards, and we cross-country ski right out on our property. We snowshoe. We love the winter, and we love the wood fire and all that stuff. And so I'm just so excited for winter to get a ton of snow, so we have a crushing ski season, but then also have an epic snow melt. It'll be so cool. I've done calculations, and I should do another video on this, actually. Maybe I will. I've done last year I did a vlog on From the Field, where I went on Google Earth, and I showed the whole open area of my property where I could capture snowmelt, basically showing all the surface area above any particular riparian areas that will concentrate the flow of water, or roads that divert the flow of water, or terraces that divert, or swales, or French drains that divert. All these different things divert water. And I looked at what the surface area of that above those things were, and then I went out in March and I did I cut a cubic foot of snow. And it's a good time to do this if you want to do this kind of calculation, because that's when the snow is really kind of packed down, and so you can kind of get an idea of what the full pack would have been. And so you can also measure accumulated snowfall. It's not the amount of snow that's on the ground that's sitting there, it's how much has fallen, because snow waxes and wanes for many parts of the winter. The stuff down, it melts when the sun comes up, it goes down below, it'll freeze down below, but then it'll kind of create these channels underneath the snow that will be like little under the snow rivers. And that's how snow will move once it's melting. But anyways, I did this calculation, and I calculated, I believe it was about 18 million liters. Again, I'll do a whole other video on this again, but it was about 18 million liters that I could capture from everything where our infrastructure is that diverts water. Now, that's more than what I capture here, because what I'm capturing here is essentially everything above this point. So everything above where I'm standing right now and to the ridge, I can capture. because everything above me is this way in one direction. Everything below me is out towards my gardens, greenhouses, the house, and all that stuff. So this is a high point. So essentially I can capture everything above here. And I'm going to guess approximately that it's going to be, call it a third to a quarter what I originally calculated, okay? And so let's just do some rough math just to kind of get excited about this. And mostly this is for my own self-indulgence, but a place that I can record it as a journal so that I can look back on it. And that's a lot of what my videos have been for me over the years. Anyways, let's say it's a quarter. Let's lowball it. Let's say 18 million in that first thing. A quarter of that is 4.5 million, which would be more than what I would need, because I did a rough calculation of that pond up there. I did an average of 4 foot depth, and I did it at 3,000 square feet. It came out to be about 850,000 liters. This pond is going to be significantly less. This pond will be, if I had to guess, I mean, unless we get another deep spot, but it looks like our shelf here is going up. So this will get shallower as it goes, which will be really good, because that'll be a safety thing. For when if my kids are, I mean, we wouldn't let our kids just come out here without us, but in a case that they did, that end's going to be shallow, and that's the end that we come in. And so that's a good thing, just for safety in general. But if this ends up being, I don't know, a third of what that other one is at 850, I'm still looking really to hold about 1 million liters. And it looks like I have far more than that in what I can capture of the melt. Which is great. It's good to have more available than you can need. But it's also kind of cool too, in that knowing that I can do something that's ecologically beneficial without actually damaging the ecology that much. And in my thinking, and you tell me what you think in the comments, but my thinking is that it's like the old cliche, you can't make an omelet without breaking a few eggs, okay? So if you want to do something in the environment, you have to have an impact. There's going to be some kind of measurable damage. I mean, case in point here, digging a big hole, taking this soil out. And then you could also make the case that, if everybody were to make dams, then no water would end up in the ocean, which is a retarded claim, because that would mean that literally everybody would have to make dams, and that's just not going to happen. There's probably not even 1,000th, 1 in 1,000 people that are doing what I'm doing. That doesn't matter either, but just to say, okay, there's less water now going into flowing through the watershed. But not really. If we're talking, in my case, 18 million liters is moving through this exposed watershed that we have that I can measure. And it's far beyond that if you just measure all the trees around me and everything. This little thing I'm doing is a fart in the wind. In the cosmos of time, it's a fart in the wind, because it is not even a measurable percentage when you just pull the lens back and look at the greater area. So it's a negligible amount of water taken out of that natural hydrologic cycle. Now we're creating habitat for animals, habitat for microbiology, habitat for different types of plant species that like water. I'm also now have a massive decentralized source for fire protection, which is a huge benefit to the natural ecology and the property around it. And of course, all the quality of life things. It's a win-win-win when you really can do this in a way that just benefits the landscape. And that's really what we're trying to do here. So yeah, so those are my thoughts on this pond project so far. I'll keep you up to date where it goes next. Thanks for watching, folks. If you want to learn any more about the products and services that we offer, head over to freedomfarmers.com. We can teach you how to get on the land and everything else from there.